I heard it first as a murmur. Soft words not meant for my ears. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but some things cut through clear as a bell. Why is Martha still living alone in that big house? At her age, she should be in a retirement home. I stood frozen on the back porch of my son's house, holding my famous apple pie, still warm, the cinnamon and nutmeg scenting the air around me. The screen door hadn't creaked when I'd opened it. They didn't know I was there. I know, but she's so stubborn. Richard's voice now. My only son. Mom refuses to even discuss it. Said she's fine on her own. Well, she's not. Did you see how long it took her to get up the stairs last time? And she forgot to turn off her stove when we visited Tuesday. That was Diane, my daughter-in-law. I hadn't forgotten the stove. I'd turned it to low because the sauce needed to simmer. But they saw what they wanted to see. It's becoming a burden, Diane continued. We're always worried she'll fall or worse. And honestly, that house is worth a fortune now. If she'd just sell it, I should have announced myself then. Should have cleared my throat or knocked him. Instead, I stood there, apple pie cooling in my trembling hands, as my son, my Richard, whom I'd raised alone after Howard died 30 years ago, sighed heavily. I know, maybe after the holidays we can bring it up again, or get Dr. Wilson to suggest it. She might listen to him. My chest tightened. They were planning to manipulate me, my own family. I shifted my weight, and the floorboard creaked. The kitchen went silent. Hello, Richard called out. Is someone there? I didn't run. I didn't hide. I straightened my back, gripped my pie tin, and walked through the door as if I hadn't heard a thing. There you are, I said, my voice remarkably steady. I brought dessert. Their faces, the flash of guilt across Richard's features, the tight smile Diane fixed in place, told me everything. They recovered quickly, of course. Diane took the pie with practiced politeness. Richard kissed my cheek. But something had changed. Or rather, something had been revealed. I sat through dinner watching them with new eyes. The way they exchanged glances when I mentioned my garden plans for spring. The way Richard spoke a little louder than necessary, as if I were already deaf. The careful questions about my medications, my doctor appointments. They didn't see a person. They saw a problem to be managed. I picked at my pot roast, smiling and nodding at all the right moments. Little Olivia, my 14-year-old granddaughter, chatted about her science project. She was the only one who looked me in the eye without that mixture of concern and impatience. Grandma, could you help me with my presentation? It's about botanical classifications. And Mom said you used to teach science. Before I could answer, Diane jumped in. Oh, honey, Grandma's busy, and that project is due soon. We don't want to burden her. I caught Olivia's disappointed look. I'm never too busy for you, sweetheart, I said, my voice firm. I'd love to help. That night, driving home to my too big house, I realized I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. And beneath that heartbreak was something else. Determination. I'd spent 15 years since Howard's death, being careful not to impose, not to need too much, not to be a burden. I'd given Richard and Diane the down payment for their house, $45,000 from Howard's life insurance. I'd watched Olivia and her younger brother Tyler every weekend while they built their careers. I'd made myself small to fit into the corners of their lives. And still, I was a burden, a problem, an inconvenience. As I pulled into my driveway, the motion lights clicked on, illuminating the home Howard and I had bought in 1975. It wasn't a mansion, just a 3-bedroom craftsman, with good bones and a garden I'd tended for decades. But it was mine. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every memory. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same oak table where Richard had done his homework, where Howard and I had paid bills and planned vacations, where I now sat alone most evenings. I opened my planner and turned to a blank page. At the top I wrote, "What Martha wants." It was the first time in years I'd asked myself that question. I slept poorly that night, Richard and Diane's words echoing in my mind. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep. and padded downstairs in my robe. The house creaked familiarly around me as I made coffee. My too big house that had sheltered me through every season of my life. Standing at the kitchen window as dawn broke over my garden, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Richard and Diane. I wouldn't cry or rage or demand apologies. Instead, I would quietly, methodically, reclaim my life. Starting today. After breakfast, I called my old friend Patricia Fleming. We'd met at a book club years ago, and though we didn't see each other often anymore, I knew she was still practicing law, specializing in elder affairs. "Martha, what a lovely surprise," she said when she picked up. "Patricia, I need some legal advice. Are you free for lunch today?" She must have heard something in my voice because she didn't hesitate. "Of course. Shall we say noon at Wildflower Cafe?" The cafe was quiet when I arrived. Just a few tables occupied by business people having working lunches. Patricia waved from a corner booth. She looked good. Silver hair in a sleek bob. Sharp eyes behind stylish glasses. "So," she said after we'd ordered, "what's this about, Martha? You sounded serious on the phone." I took a deep breath. "I need to change some things. My will, my power of attorney, my finances, everything." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't seem shocked. "I see. May I ask what prompted this?" I told her about what I'd overheard, about the years of subtle diminishment, about the house they wanted me to sell, the life they wanted me to shrink. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You've been very generous with your family," she said. "Perhaps too generous. I thought that's what mothers did." "It is. But there comes a point where generosity becomes," she searched for the right word, "self-erasure." I hadn't expected to cry, but tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "That's exactly it." Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, the good news is, it's your money, your house, your life. And legally speaking, we can rearrange things however you want." For the next hour, we outlined a plan. I would revoke Richard's power of attorney. I would change my will, removing him as primary beneficiary and executor. I would close our joint checking account and open new accounts at a different bank. I would create a living trust for my house and other assets. "What about my grandchildren?" I asked. "I don't want to punish them." Patricia tapped her pen against her notebook. "We can set up educational trusts for them that bypass their parents entirely. They'll have access when they're of age." By the time our lunch plates were cleared, I had a list of action items and a follow-up appointment at Patricia's office. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a sense of control returning. "One more thing," Patricia said as we were preparing to leave. "Don't tell Richard or Diane about any of this until everything's in place. It will be easier that way." I nodded, understanding completely. They already think I'm incapable of managing my own affairs. They won't expect me to act. Patricia smiled, a fierce little grin that reminded me of why I'd always liked her. "Use that to your advantage, Martha. The most powerful position is often the one where they underestimate you." As I drove home, I felt something unfamiliar bubbling up inside me. Not anger. Not exactly. Something lighter, more buoyant, something that felt almost like freedom. I didn't see Richard or Diane for the next week. I claimed I had a cold, which wasn't entirely untrue. The emotional shock had left me feeling drained and achy, but mostly I was busy. Each day brought a new task in my reclamation project. Monday, I visited my bank and spoke with the manager, a kind woman named Brenda, who knew me by name. I closed the joint account Richard and I had opened for emergencies and removed him as an authorized user on my credit card. I opened new accounts at First Capital across town. Accounts only in my name with new passwords and security questions. Richard wouldn't be able to guess. Tuesday, I met with Patricia again and signed the paperwork to revoke Richard's power of attorney. We drafted a new one, naming Patricia as my healthcare proxy and financial agent. We also began the process of creating a living trust for my house and investments. Who do you want to name as beneficiaries for your estate? Patricia asked. I'd thought about this question all night. Olivia and Tyler will get educational trusts, as we discussed. For the rest, I took a deep breath. The Greenfield Women's Shelter. Patricia looked up from her notes. Any particular reason? They helped a friend of mine years ago. They do good work. I didn't elaborate. Some stories weren't mine to tell, even now. Wednesday, I visited Dr. Cooper for my annual physical. After he pronounced me in excellent health for a woman of any age, I asked him for copies of all my medical records. Planning a move? He asked conversationally, as his nurse prepared the paperwork. No, I said, just getting my affairs in order. Thursday was the hardest day. I spent hours going through photo albums and keepsakes, separating what I wanted to keep from what I was ready to let go. I found the folder of financial documents related to the money I'd given Richard and Diane, the down payment for their house, the loans that were never repaid, the checks for Tyler's private school tuition. I didn't want the money back. That wasn't the point. But I needed to see the evidence of my generosity laid out before me. Needed to remind myself that I had been a good mother, a giving mother, that I deserved better than to be discussed like a problem over dinner. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't call Richard for our Thursday check-in. The phone rang at 8:30 him, right on schedule, but I let it go to voicemail. His message was predictable, concern thinly veiling irritation that I hadn't followed our routine. Mom, just checking in. Give me a call when you get this. Hope you're feeling better. I deleted it without calling back. Friday morning, I woke with purpose. I dressed carefully in a blue sweater Howard had always liked and drove to a real estate office downtown. The agent, a young woman named Morgan with a firm handshake, listened attentively as I explained what I wanted. Not a retirement community, I specified. A condominium, preferably ground floor, somewhere close to shops and the library. 1 or 2 bedrooms is fine. Downsizing? She asked. Right sizing, I corrected gently. I'm looking for a place that fits the life I want now. She nodded, understanding. I think I might have a few options for you. When would you like to start looking? Today, if possible. The first condominium we visited was in a converted historic building downtown. High ceilings, hardwood floors, exposed brick walls. Beautiful, but the bathroom was all marble and glass. Slippery and dangerous for someone my age. The second was in a newer building near the park. It had accessibility features I hadn't even considered. Grab bars in the bathroom, lever door handles instead of knobs, a walk-in shower, but it felt sterile, institutional, too much like the retirement home Richard and Diane wanted to consign me to. The third place, though. The third place made me pause as soon as I walked through the door. It was on the ground floor of a small complex, just 12 units in all. The living room had a bay window overlooking a shared garden. The kitchen was updated but cozy, with enough counter space for baking. There was a spare bedroom that could serve as a guest room or study, and the master bedroom had a small sitting area perfect for my reading chair. The previous owner was a professor, Morgan explained as we toured. She lived here for 20 years before moving to be closer to family in Arizona. The neighbors are mostly professionals, a few retirees, a couple of young families, a librarian. I ran my hand along the built-in bookshelves in the living room. It's lovely. There's one more thing, Morgan said, opening a door I'd assumed was a closet. It led to a small sunroom, just big enough for a desk and chair. Windows on 3 sides let in dappled light filtered through the leaves of a massive oak tree outside. Oh, I said softly. Morgan smiled. I thought you might like this feature. By the time we left, I'd made an offer, slightly below asking price, but with a quick closing timeline and no contingencies. My house wasn't even on the market yet, but I had savings. I could make this work. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was taking action, making choices, building something new. I wasn't just reacting to Richard and Diane's plans for me. I was creating my own plan. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe they'd done me a favor in their clumsy, hurtful way. If I hadn't overheard them, how much longer would I have continued to shrink myself to fit their expectations? How much more of myself would I have given away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left? Saturday morning, my phone rang early. Richard, his voice tight with worry. Mom, is everything okay? You didn't call back yesterday. I'd rehearsed this conversation. I'm fine, Richard. Just busy. Busy? With what? The disbelief in his voice stung, but I kept my tone light. This and that. How are Olivia and Tyler? They're fine. Look, Mom, I thought maybe I'd come by today. Check on you. You said you were sick. I'm feeling much better now, thank you. Actually, I have plans today. A pause. Plans? What plans? I'm meeting some friends for lunch. It wasn't a lie. I was having lunch with Patricia to sign the final paperwork for my trust. What friends? The confusion in his voice was almost comical. Did he really think my entire life revolved around him and his family? Richard, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own social calendar. I'll talk to you later. All right? Give my love to the kids. I hung up before he could protest further. Then I turned off my phone. Something I never did. The silence felt strange but welcome, like removing a watch after wearing it too tight for too long. At lunch, Patricia and I finalized the trust documents. She had news about my offer on the condominium. They've accepted, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Congratulations, homeowner. I laughed, feeling a bit giddy. That was fast. Cash offers usually are. We can close in 2 weeks if you're ready. I was ready. More than ready. What about your current house? Patricia asked. I'll put it on the market after I move. I don't want to deal with showings while I'm still living there. Patricia nodded. Smart. And what about Richard? Have you told him anything yet? I shook my head. Not yet. I'm still processing everything myself. He'll find out eventually. Especially once you list the house. I know. I'm not avoiding the conversation forever, just until I'm settled in my new place, until everything's legally squared away. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard when I turned it back on. Mom, call me ASAP. Worried about you. I sighed and showed Patricia the message. You know, she said carefully. There is a part of me that wonders if you're being too harsh. Richard may have said some insensitive things. But it's not just what he said, I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. It's what he's been doing or not doing for years. It's the way he looks through me instead of at me. It's the way he makes decisions about my life without consulting me. It's the fact that he sees me as a responsibility, not a person. Patricia held up her hands in surrender. I understand. And legally, you're well within your rights to do exactly what you're doing. I just want to make sure you've thought through all the implications. I softened. I have. I'm not cutting him out of my life, Patricia. I'm just redrawing the boundaries. He's still my son, and I love him. But I won't be managed like a child or treated like an inconvenience. After lunch, I drove to the hardware store and bought new locks for my doors. The young man who helped me didn't question why a woman my age needed deadbolts. He just asked if I wanted them installed. No, thank you, I said. I can manage. And I did. That afternoon, I changed both the front and back door locks, working methodically with tools Howard had labeled and organized in the garage. My hands remembered the motions, though it had been years since I'd done any home repairs. Richard always insisted on helping, which usually meant taking over completely. When I was finished, I stood in my doorway and looked at my handiwork. Such a small act of independence, changing a lock, but it felt monumental. That evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner for myself, the doorbell rang. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Richard stood on my porch, his face a mask of worry and frustration. Mom, why haven't you been answering your phone? I've been calling all day. I turned it off while I was at lunch, I said calmly. I must have forgotten to turn it back on. Would you like to come in? He brushed past me, already launching into a lecture. You can't just disappear like that. I was about to call the police. You said you were sick, and then suddenly you're out with friends and not answering your phone. I closed the door behind him and took a deep breath. Richard, I appreciate your concern, but I'm an adult. I don't need to account for my whereabouts to you or anyone else. He stared at me, momentarily startled by my tone. Then his eyes narrowed. Did you change your locks? I hadn't expected him to notice so quickly. Yes, I did. Why? What's going on with you, Mom? There was genuine confusion in his voice, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Nothing's going on with me, Richard. I'm simply making some changes in my life. What kind of changes? His voice had that wary tone people use when they suspect someone might be losing their grip on reality. I decided to give him a small piece of the truth. I'm thinking of downsizing. This house is rather large for just me. Relief flooded his features. That's what I've been saying. This is great news, Mom. We can start looking at retirement communities right away. There's a really nice one near us. I'm not interested in a retirement community, I cut in. I've actually found a condominium downtown that I like. The relief vanished, replaced by suspicion. A condo? Downtown? When did you even look at places? Yesterday. Without telling me? Mom, this is a major decision. You shouldn't be rushing into anything without consulting. Consulting whom, Richard? You? Like you consulted me before deciding I should sell my home and move into a retirement facility. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. What are you talking about? I heard you and Diane talking last week. About how I'm becoming a burden. About how my house is worth a fortune if I just sell it. Color drained from his face. Mom, that wasn't, we were just concerned about me, I finished for him, planning what's best for me without including me in the conversation. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father, it momentarily softened my resolve. We're worried about you living alone. Is that so terrible? No, I said quietly. Being concerned isn't terrible, but treating me like I'm already incompetent. I don't think you're incompetent. Don't you? You question my decisions? You speak to me in that loud, slow voice reserved for children and the very elderly. You make plans for my future as if I have no say in the matter. He started to protest, then stopped, perhaps hearing the truth in my words. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the air between us heavy with unspoken grievances. Finally, he sighed. So you're moving to a condo? Yes. When? Soon. The offer's been accepted. I'll close in 2 weeks. His eyebrows shot up. That fast? What about this house? Have you listed it yet? Do you have a realtor? Have you thought about... Richard, I interrupted gently. I've thought about everything. I have a plan, and I don't need your help with this. Something flickered across his face, hurt, perhaps, or realization. I see. No, I said, suddenly tired. I don't think you do, but maybe someday you will. He left shortly after, promising to call tomorrow. I locked the door behind him. My new lock, my decision, and leaned against it, exhausted but oddly triumphant. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, and I was still standing. The next morning, I woke to a text from Olivia. Grandma, can I come over today? I need help with my science project. I smiled and texted back, Of course, sweetheart. Come for lunch? Her reply was immediate. Be there at 12. Can I bring Samantha? Samantha was her best friend, a quiet girl with thick glasses and a passion for astronomy. I liked her. I texted back. Absolutely, I'll make sandwiches. The morning stretched before me, full of possibility. I decided to start packing, beginning with the easiest room, the guest bedroom that was rarely used anymore. I found boxes in the garage and worked steadily, sorting items into 3 piles: keep, donate, discard. It was liberating, letting go of things I'd held onto out of obligation or habit. By noon, I'd filled 3 boxes for donation and 2 for keeping. I heard Olivia's laugh before the doorbell rang, followed by the sound of teenage girls chattering on my porch. Grandma! Olivia threw her arms around me when I opened the door. At 14, she was already taller than me, all long limbs and boundless energy. We brought our project stuff. And cookies, Samantha added shyly, holding up a plastic container. My mom made them. Well, isn't this lovely? I said, ushering them inside. I've got sandwich fixings in the kitchen. You girls can build your own. Over lunch, they explained their project, a presentation on plant classification systems through history. Olivia had chosen the topic because of my background in botany. Mom said you used to teach science? Olivia asked, carefully constructing a sandwich with precise layers of turkey, cheese, and lettuce. I did. High school biology and botany for almost 30 years. That's so cool, Samantha said, her eyes wide behind her glasses. My mom's an accountant. I laughed. That's important too. Now tell me more about this project. For the next 2 hours, we spread books and papers across my dining room table. I pulled out my old teaching materials from the attic, pressed plant specimens, classification charts, even some slides I'd used in my classroom. The girls were enthusiastic learners, especially when I showed them how to use a microscope to examine leaf structures. Grandma, this is amazing, Olivia said, looking up from the microscope. Why didn't you ever teach me this stuff before? The question caught me off guard. I suppose no one ever asked, I said finally. She frowned slightly. Well, that was dumb of us. Her candor made me smile. It's never too late to learn. As they worked on their presentation boards, I found myself telling stories from my teaching days. The time a student brought a snake to class that escaped into the ventilation system. The year we grew a garden that supplied vegetables for the school cafeteria. The botany club camping trips to identify wild plants. You had such a cool life, Olivia said, looking up from her poster. Have, I corrected gently. I have a cool life. After the girls left, promises to return next weekend ringing in the air, I sat in my suddenly quiet house and reflected on the afternoon. Olivia had seen me, really seen me, perhaps for the first time, not as just grandma who baked cookies and gave birthday checks, but as a person with a history, with knowledge, with value. And in seeing me, she'd helped me see myself more clearly, too. The week that followed was a blur of activity. I signed closing papers for the condominium. I hired a moving company. I continued packing, room by room, each box a decision about what part of my past would accompany me into my future. Richard called daily, his tone oscillating between concern and irritation. I answered sometimes, let it go to voicemail, others. When we did speak, I kept the conversations brief and focused on practicalities. Do you need help packing? He asked on Wednesday. No, thank you. I've hired movers. But who's going through all your things with you? You can't possibly sort through 50 years of. I'm managing just fine, Richard. It's actually quite liberating. A pause. Mom, I feel like something's changed between us. I considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. Something Is this still about what you overheard? Because I've tried to explain. It's not just about that. It's about how I've allowed myself to be diminished over the years. How I've participated in my own erasure. What does that even mean? Frustration edged his voice. It means I'm reclaiming my life. And part of that means redefining our relationship. You're my mother. That doesn't need redefining. I'm a person first, Richard. A person who happens to be your mother. There's a difference. The silence that followed told me he didn't understand, or perhaps wasn't ready to understand. That was okay. I wasn't doing this for him. Thursday evening, Patricia called with news. The trust is finalized, she said. And I filed the paperwork to remove Richard from your accounts and medical directives. It's all official now. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. Just doing my job, she said, but I could hear the smile in her voice. How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question. Lighter. Like I've set down a heavy load I didn't even realize I was carrying. Good. That's exactly how you should feel. After we hung up, I made a cup of tea and sat on my back porch, watching the sunset paint my garden in golden light. This view, these flowers I'd planted and tended, was perhaps the only thing I would truly miss about this house. But gardens could be replanted. New roots could take hold. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Richard told me about your condo. We should talk about what furniture you'll need to take. Most of yours won't fit in a smaller place. I didn't respond. Diane had always treated my possessions, my taste, as somehow less than hers. My antique oak dining set was dated. My collection of botanical prints was cluttered. My handmade quilts were crafty, and not in a complimentary way. Another text followed. We can help you sort through everything. Decide what to keep and what to donate. Again, I didn't respond. The presumption that I needed their help, their judgment to decide which of my own possessions were worthy of keeping, made my jaw clench. This was exactly the kind of subtle diminishment I was breaking free from. Friday morning, I had an appointment with Dr. Cooper for a follow-up on some routine blood work. His office was in the medical complex across from the hospital where I'd worked as a volunteer for nearly a decade after retiring from teaching. Everything looks excellent, Dr. Cooper said, reviewing my charts. Blood pressure, cholesterol, bone density, all better than average for your age group. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I smiled. I plan to. He peered at me over his reading glasses. You seem different today, Martha. More present? I suggested. He nodded. That's it exactly. You're fully here. As I was leaving, I ran into Nancy Thorne, who had supervised the hospital volunteer program during my time there. She enveloped me in a warm hug. Martha, it's been too long. We miss you in the pediatric ward. I miss it too, I admitted. The years I'd spent reading to sick children had been among the most rewarding of my life. I'd only stopped when Richard suggested it was too much for me, that I was overextending myself. You should come back, Nancy said. We're always short-handed, especially for the evening reading program. I found myself nodding. I'd like that. I'm moving next week, but once I'm settled. Wonderful. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready. I tucked the card into my purse, a small thrill of anticipation running through me. Another piece of myself reclaimed. That evening, Richard and Diane showed up unannounced at my door. Richard looked determined, Diane uncomfortable. I invited them in, more curious than annoyed by their arrival. Mom, Richard began as soon as we were seated in the living room. We need to talk about what's been going on with you. I raised an eyebrow. What's been going on with me? He glanced at Diane, who nodded encouragingly. These sudden changes. The condo. Changing your locks. Not returning calls. It's not like you. Perhaps you don't know what's like me as well as you think, I said mildly. Diane leaned forward. Martha, we're concerned. These impulsive decisions. There's nothing impulsive about my decisions. I interrupted. I've thought them through carefully. But why now? Richard pressed. Why all of a sudden? I looked at them both, these people who claimed to know me, to care about me, yet couldn't see the most obvious answer, because I finally realized I had a choice. A choice about what? Diane asked, her brow furrowed. About how to live the rest of my life. About whether to accept being sidelined and managed, or to claim my own agency. Richard made a noise of frustration. No one's sidelining you, Mom. Aren't they? I kept my voice calm. You make decisions about my life without consulting me. You dismiss my capabilities. You treat my independence as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be respected. That's not fair, Diane protested. We've only ever wanted what's best for you. What you think is best for me, I corrected. There's a difference. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that again reminded me painfully of Howard. So this is what? Some kind of rebellion? No, I said softly. It's a reclamation. They left shortly after, clearly unsatisfied with our conversation, but unsure how to proceed. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a twinge of sadness. I hadn't wanted confrontation or estrangement. I'd simply wanted recognition, respect. to be seen as a person, not a problem. Saturday dawned bright and clear, perfect moving weather. The movers arrived promptly at 8 a.m., efficient young men who treated my belongings with care. By noon, everything I had decided to keep was loaded into their truck. I stood in my empty house, footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. 47 years of life in this space. Howard and I bringing baby Richard home from the hospital. Birthday parties in the backyard. Christmas mornings around the tree that always stood in the front window. Howard's final days in the downstairs bedroom. We'd converted when the stairs became too much for him. So many memories. But they weren't in the walls or the floors. They were in me. I would carry them wherever I went. I locked the door, my new lock, one final time and placed the key in an envelope for the realtor. Then I got into my car and drove toward my new home, my new beginning. The condominium was flooded with afternoon light when I arrived. The movers had placed my furniture according to the floor plan I'd provided, and while there were still boxes everywhere, it already felt like mine. The bay window in the living room framed a view of the communal garden, where late summer flowers nodded in the breeze. I unpacked just enough to make the place functional. Sheets on the bed, towels in the bathroom, coffee maker on the kitchen counter. The rest could wait. For now, I wanted to explore. The condominium complex was built around a central courtyard with benches and flowering trees. As I walked the perimeter, an elderly man tending a small plot of herbs nodded in greeting. "You must be the new neighbor in 1B, he said. "I'm Arthur, 2A. "Martha," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "Just moved in today. Welcome to the neighborhood. We have a little garden club that meets Wednesdays if you're interested. Nothing formal, just coffee and complaining about squirrels." I laughed. That sounds lovely. By the time I returned to my unit, the sun was setting. I made a simple dinner and ate it at my kitchen counter, too tired to unpack my dining table. As I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. Olivia's name appeared on the screen. "Grandma, did you really move today?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm in my new place now." "Dad's freaking out," she said, her voice low as if she didn't want to be overheard. "He and Mom have been arguing all evening. I heard your name a lot." I sighed. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." "I'm not," she said firmly. "I'm on your side." "There shouldn't be sides, Olivia." "Well, there are, and I pick yours." Her voice softened. "Can I come see your new place tomorrow?" "I'd love that, but you should check with your parents first." She made a dismissive sound. "I'm 14, not 4. I can take the bus." "Olivia," I said, using my teacher voice. "Check with your parents. I don't want to create more tension." "Fine," she grumbled. "But if they say no, I'm climbing out my window." "You will do no such thing," I said, though I couldn't help smiling at her fierce loyalty. "Text me tomorrow after you've asked them." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my new bed, thinking about the day's events. I felt exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I had acted entirely on my own behalf. Not to please Richard, not to make things easier for Diane, not to maintain family harmony at the cost of my own diminishment. Just for me. Just because I deserved it. I slept deeply that night, dreamless and still. Sunday morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, I was disoriented. And then I remembered, this was home now, my new beginning. I spent the morning unpacking boxes, arranging books on shelves, finding homes for treasured objects. Each item I placed felt like a deliberate choice, not just a matter of habit. The blue ceramic bowl Howard had bought me in Mexico went on the kitchen counter to hold fruit. The quilt my grandmother had made took pride of place on my bed. The botanical prints I'd collected over the years lined the hallway to my bedroom. By noon, the condo was beginning to feel like mine. I'd just made a sandwich for lunch when my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Dad says I can come if he drives me." "Okay." I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to see Richard again so soon. But I wouldn't keep Olivia away just because things were strained between her father and me. I texted back, "That's fine. Here's the address." An hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Olivia bouncing with excitement and Richard standing awkwardly behind her, hands shoved in his pockets. "Grandma, your new place looks so cool from the outside. Show me everything." I stepped aside to let them in. "Hello, Richard," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded, his eyes taking in the space. "Mom." I gave them a quick tour, Olivia exclaiming over the bay window in the sunroom. Richard silent and watchful. When we returned to the living room, Olivia flopped onto the couch. "This place is awesome, Grandma. It's so—" "Thank you, sweetheart." Richard cleared his throat. "It's smaller than I expected." "It's exactly the size I need," I replied. "And the neighborhood? Is it safe?" "Perfectly. There's a security system for the building, and most of the residents have lived here for years." He seemed to be searching for something else to criticize, then gave up. "Well, it's nice. Thank you." I turned to Olivia. "Would you like to help me unpack some of the kitchen boxes? I brought those cookies you like." She jumped up. "Yes." As she headed for the kitchen, Richard touched my arm. "Mom, can we talk for a minute? Privately?" I nodded and led him to the sunroom, closing the door softly behind us. He stood awkwardly among the half-unpacked boxes, looking more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. "What's going on, Mom? Really?" I took a deep breath. "I'm reclaiming my life, Richard, making choices that reflect what I want, not what others think I should want." "But why now? Why like this?" He gestured vaguely at the condo, at me, at the situation. I considered my words carefully, because I realized something when I overheard you and Diane talking. I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd become a problem to be managed rather than a person to be respected. And I decided I didn't want to live that way anymore. He flinched. "That's not how I see you, isn't it?" "Be honest, Richard. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. After a moment, he said softly, "I don't know. That's why I'm doing this. Because I want to be asked. I want to be seen." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "I'm trying to understand, Mom. I really am. But it feels like you're shutting me out." "I'm creating boundaries, Richard. There's a difference." "But the locks? The condo? Moving without even telling me until after the fact? Would you have supported my decisions if I had told you?" He hesitated, then admitted, "Probably not the condo. I still think a retirement community would be safer. And that's exactly why I didn't consult you. Because you believe you know what's best for me, even when it conflicts with what I know is best for myself." He looked around the sunroom, his gaze landing on a box labeled Howard's Books. "Is this about Dad? About missing him?" The question caught me off guard. Not directly, but Howard always saw me clearly. He never tried to manage me or diminish me. Richard's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "I'm not trying to diminish you, Mom. I'm trying to protect you." The vulnerability in his voice touched me. "I know you think that's what you're doing, but protection that comes at the cost of autonomy isn't protection at all. It's control." He wiped at his eyes, embarrassed. "I don't want to control you. I worry." "You can worry about me without making decisions for me." He nodded slowly. "I think I understand. At least I'm trying to." From the kitchen we heard Olivia call out, "Grandma, where do you want these mixing bowls?" "Top cabinet to the left of the sink," I called back, then turned to Richard. "We should join her before she rearranges my entire kitchen." He managed a small smile. "She's a force of nature, that one." "Like her grandmother," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. For the next hour, the three of us unpacked boxes together. Richard was quieter than usual, thoughtful. Olivia chattered enough for all of us, planning where I should hang pictures, suggesting furniture arrangements, asking questions about the neighbors. When it was time for them to leave, Olivia hugged me tightly. I'm coming back next weekend to help you finish unpacking, she declared. I'd like that, I said, hugging her back. Richard hesitated at the door, then said awkwardly, Do you need anything? Groceries or? I'm fine, Richard. But thank you for asking. He nodded, then surprised me by leaning in to kiss my cheek. I love you, Mom, he whispered, even when I don't understand you. After they left, I sat in my bay window, watching the late afternoon light play across the courtyard. The conversation with Richard had been difficult, but necessary. I hadn't expected him to understand immediately, but perhaps he was beginning to see not just me, but himself, and the ways he'd unknowingly contributed to my erasure. It was a start. The next week passed in a blur of unpacking, organizing, and settling in. I met more of my neighbors. Arthur from 2A introduced me to his wife, Eleanor, who ran the garden club. The young couple in 3C brought me a houseplant as a welcome gift. The retired librarian in CA invited me to join her book club. I felt myself expanding into this new space, this new community, not as Richard's mother or Howard's widow, but as Martha, just Martha. On Wednesday evening, I attended my first garden club meeting. We sat in Arthur and Eleanor's condo, drinking tea and discussing fall plantings for the communal garden. I mentioned my experience with native pollinator plants, and suddenly everyone was asking for my advice on what would attract butterflies and bees. You're a botanist? Eleanor asked, impressed. I taught high school botany for 30 years, I explained. Well, thank goodness you've moved in, Arthur said. We've been trying to convince the HOA to replace some of the ornamentals with more sustainable options, but none of us had the expertise to make a compelling case. I found myself volunteering to draft a proposal for the next HOA meeting. Walking back to my condo afterward, I realized I was smiling. It felt good to be valued for my knowledge, to have something concrete to contribute. Thursday morning, Patricia called to check in. How's the new place? She asked. Wonderful. I feel like I can breathe here. And Richard? Has he come around at all? I told her about his visit with Olivia, about our conversation in the sunroom. He's trying, I said. It's all I can ask for right now. And the house? Have you listed it yet? The realtor's coming tomorrow to take photos. It should be on the market by next week. You're moving fast, Patricia observed. No sense dragging it out. Besides, I'm ready to close that chapter completely. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and carried it out to my small private patio. The day was warm for early autumn, the sky a clear, deep blue. I watched a pair of cardinals flit between the trees, their bright plumage catching the sunlight. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Mom, Diane and I want to invite you to dinner next Saturday, your choice of restaurant. The invitation surprised me. I'd expected more resistance, more attempts to make me see the error of my ways. Perhaps our conversation had made more of an impact than I'd realized. I texted back, I'd like that. How about Marcello's at 6? His response was immediate. Perfect. I'll make the reservation. I sat with my tea, pondering this development. I wasn't naive enough to think one conversation had resolved everything between us. But it was a step, Richard making an effort to meet me on my terms. In a neutral setting of my choosing, I would accept the gesture in the spirit it was offered. Friday morning, the realtor arrived to photograph the house. I'd gone back the day before to make sure everything was clean and staged properly. Walking through those empty rooms had been strange, like visiting a place I'd once lived in a dream. I'd felt nostalgia, yes, but not regret. Not the desire to turn back. The market's hot right now, the realtor told me as she reviewed the photos on her camera. Houses in this neighborhood are selling within days, often above asking price. That's good to hear. And with the condition yours is in, the updated kitchen, the landscaping, I wouldn't be surprised if we had multiple offers by this time next week. I nodded, pleased but not surprised. Howard and I had always maintained the house meticulously, and I'd continued that tradition after his death, despite Richard's constant offers to take care of things for me. That evening, I attended my first volunteer orientation at the hospital. Nancy had been delighted when I'd called to take her up on her offer to rejoin the reading program. The pediatric ward had always been my favorite place to volunteer. The children there, despite their illnesses, had a resilience and curiosity that I found inspiring. The orientation was brief, mostly a refresher on hospital protocols and patient privacy rules. Afterward, Nancy took me to dinner in the hospital cafeteria. "I'm so glad you're back," she said as we ate our rather bland chicken salads. "The kids have missed having someone who really knows how to read a story." "What do you mean?" She rolled her eyes. "Our last volunteer just read the words. No voices, no excitement. The kids were bored to tears." I laughed. "Well, I can promise voices. My grandson Tyler used to say my Gruffalo voice gave him nightmares in a good way. That's exactly what we need." She studied me over her fork. "You seem different, Martha. Lighter somehow?" It was the second time someone had made that observation. "I feel lighter," I admitted. "I've made some big changes recently." "Do tell," she encouraged. So I did, over our cafeteria dinner. Surprising myself with my candor, I told her about overhearing Richard and Diane, about my decision to reclaim my life, about moving and changing my will, and setting boundaries. Nancy listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Good for you," she said simply. "It's about damn time." I laughed, startled by her vehemence. "You think so?" "Absolutely. I've known you for what, 15 years? And in all that time, you've been the most selfless person I've ever met. Always putting everyone else first. Always apologizing for taking up space." She shook her head. "I used to wonder when you'd finally stand up for yourself." "I didn't realize it was so obvious," I said, a little embarrassed. "Maybe not to everyone. But to someone who was watching? Yeah, it was obvious." She leaned back in her chair. "You know, my mother went through something similar after my father died. Suddenly, my brothers thought they needed to manage her life. They meant well, but they were suffocating her. One day, she just snapped. Sold her house, bought an RV, and spent the next 10 years traveling the country." "An RV might be a bit extreme for me," I said, smiling. "Maybe. But the principle is the same." She reclaimed her life on her terms. Nancy raised her water glass in a mock toast. "Here's to women who refuse to be managed." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a surge of camaraderie. "To unmanageable women." Saturday morning, I woke early and decided to walk to the farmers market downtown. One of the joys of my new location was its proximity to things I enjoyed. The market, the library, my favorite coffee shop. No more driving everywhere. The market was bustling, stalls overflowing with late summer produce. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, corn. I filled my tote bag with vegetables, a loaf of sourdough bread, and a small bouquet of dahlias. As I was selecting apples, I heard a familiar voice. "Grandma." I turned to see Olivia weaving through the crowd, followed by a harried-looking Diane. "Olivia, what a nice surprise." My granddaughter hugged me, nearly upsetting my bag of apples. "We're getting stuff for dinner tonight. Mom's making her special apple pie for dessert." I glanced at Diane, who offered a tight smile. "Richard mentioned you like Marcello's apple tart, so I thought I'd try to recreate it." The gesture surprised me. Diane had never been one for cooking, and certainly not for me. "That's very thoughtful," I said sincerely. She shrugged, uncomfortable with the acknowledgement. "It's just pie." But it wasn't just pie, and we both knew it. It was an olive branch, however small. Olivia tugged at my arm. "Can you help us pick apples? Mom doesn't know which ones are best for baking." "Honey Crisp or Granny Smith," I said automatically. "Or a mix of both for more complex flavor." Diane nodded, taking notes in her phone. "And cinnamon? Nutmeg?" "Both. Plus a pinch of cardamom, if you have it. And don't forget the lemon juice to keep the apples from browning." For the next 15 minutes, we shopped together. Diane asking questions about the pie, me offering advice without being patronizing. It wasn't exactly warm between us, but it wasn't hostile either. Progress. When we parted ways, Olivia hugged me again. See you tonight, Grandma. I can't wait to show you my science project grade. I watched them walk away, Olivia chattering animatedly, Diane nodding along. Something had shifted, however, slightly. I could feel it. Back at my condo, I spent the afternoon reading in my sunroom, enjoying the way the light changed as the day progressed. At 5, I began getting ready for dinner, choosing a sapphire blue dress that Howard had always liked, adding pearl earrings and a touch of lipstick. As I was about to leave, my phone rang. Patricia, I've got news, she said without preamble. Your house has an offer, above asking price, all cash, no contingencies. I sat down, momentarily stunned. Already. It's not even officially on the market yet. Pre-market listing. The buyers saw it online and didn't want to wait for the open house. They're moving from Chicago and need to close quickly. How quickly? 30 days. Maybe less if we push the paperwork. I took a deep breath. Let me think about it. Of course. Take the weekend. But Martha, it's a very good offer. 20,000 above asking. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, processing the news. It was happening faster than I'd anticipated, this final severing of ties with my old life. But wasn't that what I wanted? A clean break? A fresh start? The house was just a structure. The memories, the love, the life I'd built with Howard and then continued on my own. Those were inside me. They would go wherever I went. I grabbed my purse and keys and headed out the door. I'd give Patricia my answer tomorrow. Tonight was for family, complicated, challenging, evolving family. Marcello's was crowded when I arrived, the warm, garlic-scented air humming with conversation. Richard, Diane, and the children were already seated at a corner table. Olivia waved enthusiastically when she spotted me. Grandma, over here! Richard stood as I approached, pulling out my chair. Mom, you look lovely. Thank you. I sat down, taking in their faces. Tyler, at 12, was still in that awkward stage, all limbs and uncertainty. He gave me a shy smile, then returned his attention to his phone. Olivia, by contrast, immediately launched into an account of her science project grade, an A-bond, and how her teacher had been impressed by the botanical specimens I'd helped her identify. Diane seemed tense, but making an effort. Richard was watchful, as if unsure of his footing in this new dynamic between us. We ordered pasta for the adults, pizza for the children, and as we waited for our food, I decided to share my news. I've had an offer on the house, I said during a lull in the conversation. Richard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Already? It's only been a day. Yes. The realtor says it's a strong offer, above asking price. That's fast. He set his fork down. Are you going to accept? I could hear the unspoken questions beneath his words. Are you really doing this? Is this really happening? I'm thinking about it, I said. I'll decide tomorrow. Diane spoke up, her voice carefully neutral. It would be good to have the matter settled quickly. I suppose? I nodded, appreciating her practical approach, even if it stemmed from discomfort. Olivia, sensing the tension, changed the subject. Grandma, I want to show you the photos from my field trip to the botanical gardens. They had this amazing greenhouse with carnivorous plants. The conversation shifted, flowing around the awkward moment like water around a stone. We ate, we talked, we shared dessert. Diane had brought her homemade apple pie after all, and it was surprisingly good. Not quite Marcello's standard, but made with genuine effort. As the evening wound down, Richard insisted on walking me to my car. The night air was cool, stars visible despite the city lights. Thank you for coming, he said as we reached my car. It meant a lot to the kids, to all of us. I enjoyed it, and I had, despite the underlying tension. We should do it again. He nodded, then hesitated. Mom, about the house. Are you sure about selling? It's happening so fast. I'm sure about moving forward, Richard. The house is part of that. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. I keep thinking about what you said, about me trying to manage you instead of respect you. He swallowed hard. I've been thinking a lot about that. And, and you might be right. I didn't see it that way, but looking back, he shook his head. I just wanted to keep you safe, to make sure you were taken care of. I know, I touched his arm gently. Your intentions were good, but the impact was that I felt diminished, invisible. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry for that. Truly. I know you are. We stood in silence for a moment. The night sounds of the city surrounding us, distant traffic, music from the restaurant, the rustle of leaves in a passing breeze. So what now? Richard finally asked. Where do we go from here? Forward, I said simply, with more awareness on your part and more assertiveness on mine. He smiled slightly. You've been pretty assertive lately. I have, haven't I? I couldn't help the small note of pride in my voice. He seemed to search for the right word. Good. Different, but good. I opened my car door. Good night, Richard. Thank you for dinner. Good night, Mom. Drive safe. As I drove back to my condo, I reflected on the evening. It hadn't been perfect. There had been awkward moments, unspoken tensions, but there had also been genuine effort. Diane's pie, Richard's apology, Olivia's enthusiasm, even Tyler's shy smile. It was a beginning, a recalibration of our family dynamic. And for now, that was enough. Sunday morning, I called Patricia. I'll take the offer on the house, I told her. All the terms as presented. Excellent. I'll let the realtor know. We can sign the paperwork tomorrow. After we hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The final piece was falling into place. My old house would go to a new family, who would fill it with their own memories, their own lives, and I would continue building my new life here, in this space I had chosen for myself. I spent the day arranging my books in the sunroom, botany texts from my teaching days, novels Howard and I had read aloud to each other, poetry collections, gardening guides. Each one found its place on the shelves, creating a tapestry of my interests, my history, myself. In the afternoon, I joined the garden club for their weekly work session in the communal space. Arthur showed me the plot they'd assigned me, a small patch near the oak tree, currently overgrown with weeds. It's not much, he apologized, but it gets good morning sun. It's perfect, I said, already planning what I would plant. Autumn crocuses, perhaps, and some early spring bulbs for next year. Native grasses for winter interest. A small herb garden for cooking. As I worked alongside my new neighbors, pulling weeds and turning soil, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. These people saw me as I was now, not as an aging mother to be managed, but as a neighbor with skills to contribute, stories to share, a presence that mattered. Monday morning, I signed the paperwork accepting the offer on my house. 30 days to closing, 30 days until that chapter of my life was officially ended. I felt a momentary pang of nostalgia, but no regret, only anticipation for what lay ahead. That evening, Olivia called. Grandma, is it true you sold the house? Yes, sweetheart. The paperwork signed. A pause. I'm going to miss it. All those Christmases and birthdays. I know. I'll miss certain things too, but we'll make new memories in my new place. Dad seemed sad when he told us. Change is hard for everyone, I said gently, but sometimes it's necessary. I guess. Another pause. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you and Dad going to be okay, like in the long run? The question touched me with its directness, its concern. Yes, Olivia, we're going to be fine. Different, but fine. Good, because I couldn't stand it if you guys weren't talking or something. That won't happen, I assured her. Your father and I are finding a new way to relate to each other. That's all. A way that works better for both of us. After we hung up, I sat in my bay window, watching the lights come on in the other units. As evening fell, I thought about Olivia's question, about Richard's apology, about the path forward. It wouldn't be easy, this recalibration. There would be missteps, old patterns reasserting themselves, moments of frustration on both sides. But there would also be growth, discovery, new understanding, and I would be present for all of it, fully present, fully seen, fully myself. The next weeks passed in a rhythm of unpacking, settling in, and building new routines. I volunteered at the hospital twice a week, reading to children who welcomed me with sleepy smiles and eager questions about the stories. I joined the garden club officially and began implementing my plans for my small plot. I explored my new neighborhood, finding favorite spots, a coffee shop with excellent scones, a secondhand bookstore with a friendly cat, a bench in the park perfect for people watching. Richard called regularly, no longer to check up on me, but to talk about his work, about the children, about memories of Howard. I listened with new ears, hearing not just his words but the effort behind them, the attempt to see me as I was rather than as he needed me to be. Diane remained more distant, but made small gestures, sending Olivia with a jar of homemade jam, inviting me to Tyler's soccer game, asking my advice about planting bulbs in their front yard. Baby steps. But steps, nonetheless. The day before closing on the house, I visited it one last time. The rooms were empty now, echoing with my footsteps. I walked through each space slowly, saying goodbye not to the structure, but to the life it had contained. In the master bedroom, I stood by the window where Howard and I had watched countless sunrises. In the kitchen, I touched the countertop where I'd prepared thousands of meals. In the backyard, I knelt by the rose bushes I'd planted when Richard graduated college. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because this farewell didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a choice, my choice to honor the past, while embracing the future. The day of closing arrived sunny and clear. Patricia accompanied me to the meeting, where I signed the final papers, transferring ownership of my home of 47 years to a young couple expecting their first child. They were there too, the wife visibly pregnant, the husband nervous and excited. They thanked me repeatedly for accepting their offer, for the care I'd taken of the house, for the detailed notes I'd left about the garden plantings. "We'll take good care of it," the wife promised, her hand resting on her belly. "We want our children to grow up in a home with history. History begins anew with you," I told her, surprising myself with my equanimity. "Make it your own." Afterward, Patricia and I had lunch at a small cafe near her office. "How do you feel?" she asked, as we waited for our food. I considered the question. "Complete," I said finally, "like I've finished a chapter and am ready to begin the next one." She smiled. "That's exactly how you should feel." That evening, Richard called. "Mom, I just wanted to check in. Today was the closing, right?" It was. Everything went smoothly. "And you're okay?" "I'm more than okay, Richard. I'm exactly where I need to be." A pause. "I'm glad. I still don't fully understand all of this. But I'm trying. That's all I can ask." Another pause. "Diane and I were wondering if you might like to come over for dinner next Sunday. Nothing fancy, just family." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. "Thank you." After we hung up, I went out to my small patio and looked up at the evening sky. The first stars were just becoming visible, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. I thought of Howard, of the life we'd built together, of the person I'd been then and the person I was becoming now. "I did it," I whispered to the stars, to him, to myself. I reclaimed my life. A gentle breeze stirred the potted herbs on my patio, basil, thyme, rosemary, plants I'd started from cuttings, now thriving in their new soil. I breathed in their mingled scents, savoring the moment, the place, the self I'd rediscovered. This was what I'd wanted all along, though I hadn't been able to name it until I'd overheard those careless words at Richard's house. Not just independence or autonomy, though those were part of it. What I'd wanted, what I'd needed, was recognition, to be seen as a whole person, complex and capable, with desires and opinions that mattered. I'd spent years making myself smaller to fit into the corners of other people's lives. But in reclaiming my space, I'd also reclaimed my voice, my agency, my rightful place in the world. Not as a burden to be managed, not as a problem to be solved, but as Martha, teacher, gardener, mother, grandmother, friend, a woman who had lived long enough to know her own mind, and brave enough to speak it. As darkness fell completely, I lit the small lantern on my patio table and sat watching the night deepen around me. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel diminished. I felt like myself, perhaps more fully than I ever had before. And that, I realized, was the greatest reclamation of all.